Good evening, one and all. Welcome you all to the one-week international seminar on Telugu, language, culture, traditions, emerging trends and challenges, awareness, education, employment, environment, health, well-being, sustainable development 2023, commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 76 years of independence, India's G20 presidency, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030 as part of awareness and campaigns in collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute Center for Art, Sciences and Wellbeing and national and international fraternity. Before we start today's sessions, let's take the blessings of Almighty.
Kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampada shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampada shatru buddhi vinashaya deepajyotirnamostute deepajyotirnamostute shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampada Shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampadah.
With the blessings of Almighty, we shall continue with today's sessions. Today, we are commemorating International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances. Which is a more than a human rights violation against an individual. Impunity compounds the suffering and anguish under international human rights. Laws, families, and societies have the right to know the truth about what happened. I call on member states to fulfill this responsibility, as quoted by Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of United Nations. More than a human rights violation against an individual is the theme. Enforced disappearances have frequently been used as a strategy to spread terror within the society. The feeling of insecurity generated by this practice is not limited to close relatives of the disappeared, but also affects their communities and society as a whole. Enforced disappearance has become a global problem and is not restricted to a specific region of the world. Once largely the product of military dictatorship, enforced disappearance can nowadays be perpetrated in complex situations of internal conflict, especially as a means of political repression of opponents of particular concern, are the ongoing harassment of human rights defenders, relatives of victims, witness and legal counsel dealing with the cases of enforced disappearances. The use by states of counter-terrorist activities as an excuse for breaching their obligations and still widespread impunity for enforced disappearances. Special attendance or special attention must also be paid to the specific groups of especially vulnerable people, like children and people with disabilities. Hundreds of thousands of people have vanished during the conflicts of periods of repression in at least 85 countries around the world. There are various stakeholders who are affected by this. The victims themselves are frequently tortured and in constant fear for their lives. They were well aware that their families do not know what has become of them, and that the chance are slim that anyone will come to their aid. Having been removed from the protective present of the law and disappeared from the society, they are in fact deprived of all their rights and the mercy of their captors. Even if death, it is not the final outcome, and the victim is eventually released from the nightmare, the physical and psychological scars of this form of dehumanization and brutality and torture, which often accompany it, remain. The families and friends of the victims experience low mental anguish, not knowing whether the victim is still alive, and if so, where he or she is being held, under what conditions, and in what state of health. The alternate between hope and despair, wondering and waiting, sometimes for years, for news that may never come. In addition, they are well aware that they too are threatened and that they may suffer from the same fate themselves, and that searching for the truth may expose them to even greater danger. The family distress is frequently compounded by the material consequences of the disappearance. The disappeared person is often the family main breadwinner. He or she may be the only member of the family able to cultivate the crops or run the family business. The emotional appeal is thus exacerbated by material deprivation, made more acute by the costs incurred should they decide to undertake a search. Furthermore, they do not know when, if ever, their loved one is going to return, which makes it difficult for them to adapt to the new situation. In some cases, national legislation may take it impossible to draw a pension or receive another means of support in the absence of a death certificate. Economic and social marginalization is frequently the result. The serious economic hardships which usually accompany a disappearance are most often borne by women, and it is women who are most often at the forefront of the struggle to resolve disappearance of family members. In the capacity, they may suffer intimidation, persecution, and reprisals. When women are themselves direct victims of disappearance, they become partially vulnerable to sexual and other forms of violence. Children can now be victims, both directly and indirectly. The disappearance of a child is a clear contravention of a number of provisions of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, including the right to personal identity. The loss of a parent through disappearance is a serious violation of a child's human rights. Communities are directly affected by the disappearance of breadwinners and the degradation of the family economic situation and their social marginalization. Enforced disappearance has frequently been used as a strategy to spread terror within the society. The feeling of insecurity generated by this practice is not limited to the close relatives of the disappeared, but affects their communities and societies as a whole. According to the Declaration on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, proclaimed by the General Assembly in its resolution 47 by 133 of 18th December 1992 as a body of principles for all states, and enforced disappearance occurs when persons are arrested, detained, or abducted against their will or otherwise deprived of their liberty by officials of different branches or levels of government, or by organized groups of private individuals acting on behalf or with support, direct or indirect, consent or acquiescence of the government, followed by a refusal to disclose the fate or whereabouts of the person concerned, or a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of their liberty, which places such person outside the protection of the laws. It is also a serious violation of human rights, having been removed from the protective prison of the law and disappeared from society. Victims of enforced disappearances are in fact deprived of all their rights and are mercy of their captors. Some of the human rights that enforced disappearances regularly violate are the right to recognition as a person before the law, the right to liberty and security of the person, the right not to be suspended to torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, the right to life when the disappeared person is killed, the right to an identity, the right to a fair trial and to judicial guarantees, the right to an effective remedy, including reparation and compensation, the right to know the truth regarding the circumstances of a disappearance. Enforced disappearances also generally violate various economic, social, and cultural rights for both the victims as well as their families. The right to protection and assistance to the family, the right to an adequate standard of living, the right to health, right to education. Both the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which came into force 1st July 2002, and the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 20th December 2006, state that when committed as a part of widespread or systematic attack directed at any civilian population, a forced disappearance qualifies as a crime against humanity and thus is not subject to the statute of limitations. It gives victims' families the right to seek reparations and to demand the truth from the disappearance of their loved one. On 21st December 2010, by its resolution 65 by 209, the UN General Assembly expressed its deep concern about the increase in enforced or involuntary disappearances in various regions of the world, including arrest, detention, and abduction. When these are a part of amount of enforced disappearances, and by growing number of reports concerning harassment, ill treatment, and intimidation of witness of disappearances or relatives of persons who have disappeared, by the same resolution, in Assembly welcomed the adoption of International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances and decided to declare 30th August, the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances, to be observed the beginning in 2011. Let's watch few videos.
These are the faces of victims of the Uruguayan dictatorship. Hundreds disappeared, and more than 10,000 women and men were detained and tortured. Some 40 years later, survivors and relatives are still fighting for their right to answers. Dr. Pablo de Grief, a human rights expert from Colombia, was appointed by the United Nations Human Rights Council to serve as special rapporteur on the promotion of truth, justice, reparation, and guarantees of non-recurrence for victims of past human rights crimes around the world. As part of this work, the government of Uruguay invited him there to assess progress in discovering the truth of past atrocities that occurred in the 70s and early 80s and ensure justice and compensation for survivors. Survivors like Chela Fontoura, who was captured but lived to tell her story.
Denuncié todo lo que habían hecho. Aquí queda claro que todo lo que pasó en este país que quieren ocultar.
Pablo recognizes that although slow, progress has been made in Uruguay with regard to victims of disappearances. One such is Soledad Dosetti Garcia, whose parents were disappeared in 1977 when she was just a baby.
Y bueno, hay algunas referencias, algunos testimonios que hablan sobre los llamados vuelos que transportaban a las personas, los prisioneros en aviones y los dejaban caer en el río de la Plata, digamos.
Although her parents' fate remains unanswered, Soledad received reparation in recognition of her loss. The special rapporteur believes if the political will is there, and determined people like Soledad and Chela keep the memories of those bitter years alive, justice will be part of Uruguay's future.
In a world with 7.5 billion people, where do you start looking when one of your loved ones disappears? Hundreds of thousands of people have vanished during conflicts or periods of repression in at least 85 countries around the world. While these sons, daughters, mothers and fathers remain unaccounted for, their families still search for answers.
Extraño tanto tus besos, tus abrazos, vivirás hoy para siempre Las estrellas iluminaron tu camino. Hijo mío, por siempre te amaré.
Enforced disappearances are shattered dreams.
Nuestros padres lo que sí hicieron fue pensar diferente y pensar que podía existir un futuro mejor.
Death is a natural thing, but disappear is not a natural thing.
There is a fear of hope.
Hasta que Dios me dé la vida, y yo siempre voy a estar reclamando y buscando la verdad, la justicia, por mis hermanos y por otros.
Todos los días en el mundo desaparecen miles de personas y que los afectados son millones de personas.
Lo imprescindible es escuchar a las víctimas. El testimonio de las víctimas es la única manera de poder entender el nivel de sufrimiento que una desaparición forzada genera en la persona que está detenida desaparecida.
My father did not plan, he did not have that notion that where he was going to, such incident was going to happen to him. No, enforced disappearances is not a planned something. It is not something that you know that, no, this is going to happen to me. It is an unforeseen circumstances, which when you hear of it, you should try and fight with your last breath.
Suddenly, when we are missing our loved ones, we couldn't tolerate that. Disappearance is a new word for like my family. When my child asking about my husband, or when my child are asking about his father, I can't answer my son.
Después de 35 años regresó a mi casa. Lo hemos hecho el velorio, ya lo hemos enterrado, pero sigue el otro, mi hermano desaparecido, que estaba detenido en el cuartel.
It was around 6 p.m. So, there were neighbors outside, there were children playing outside. And that is why we also have eyewitnesses in our case. And about 8 to 10 men came out, some masked, some in black uniforms, some in plain clothes, and they ransacked the house. They searched it without a warrant, without an explanation, and they took away my father. And ever since then, we have had no contact, and we have no information of any charges or of his whereabouts. And since then, that is the situation.
Es difícil explicar que alguien, por pensar diferente, pueda ser desaparecido y asesinado utilizando el aparato del Estado, ¿no? En este caso, de las fuerzas de seguridad, naturalmente, es el policía que está en la calle, es el militar que está en una dependencia militar.
De hecho, el grupo de trabajo tiene desapariciones forzadas sin clarificar, es decir, abiertas, casos abiertos, en los 5 continentes, en más de 100 países que forman parte de las Naciones Unidas. Por lo tanto, el trabajo de ambos mecanismos, del grupo de trabajo y del comité con las víctimas, es también esencial para poder justamente dar a conocer lo que ocurre en muchos países que además someten a las víctimas, a los familiares, a quienes buscan, a diversas formas de represión que intentan acallar la denuncia a nivel interno y también a nivel internacional.
Porque no se trata de trabajar para las víctimas, se trata de trabajar con las víctimas y con las víctimas impulsar las acciones también del Estado, dialogar con los estados para que conozcan la exacta dimensión de lo que ellos, madres, padres, hijos, hermanos, cuñados, es decir, la familia de las personas desaparecidas, reconocidas como víctimas, en su largo caminar por saber dónde están, puedan encontrarlos y hacer y lograr que su familia pueda recuperarse y sanar esas heridas.
¿Qué pueden hacer los países? ¿Qué puede hacer la comunidad internacional? Apoyar a las familias, apoyar a la sociedad civil que está trabajando en la protección contra las desapariciones forzadas.
Y la forma de hacerlo es hoy, ratificando la convención, no mañana. Esperamos muy pronto contar con la ratificación universal de la Convención para la Protección de todas las personas contra las desapariciones forzadas. Su compromiso está en la firma. Muchas gracias.
Unë jam prind I 5 antarëve, që 7-18 vjetë si kemi, 5 e vlad, nuk o pak. Me datën 16 të 4-tin, fëmija mi unë dalë për I shpije, edhe ashtu neve na thamë, që na po dalëm në gërmonë, qofte përmirësuat gjenja këthejmë. Jo, na vazhdojmë udhëtimin tonë. Mirë pa të nisen edhe dalin binë prit, thirret dres a I ven ku kanë kalu, por të këtërri. Ka, po, qysh, a I kanë quë, a I kanë pushkatu kun, a I kanë quë në burgjet Sërbies, por ta nuk di mo kur të kese.
Počelo je, to je bilo mart mesec 98. Počela su kidnapovanja, zaustavljanje na putu, kad neko putuje, zaustave auto. Ovo je moj otac, Šmigić Milosav, isto kidnapovan 9. juna 1998. godine. On I moja majka I taj brat od strica I strina. Njih su sve 4 tu pokupili, stavili ih na traktorsku prikolicu I odvezli ih prema rudniku. I mi od tad o njima ništa ne znamo. Ništa.
Sërb ne na rejnë, po duhet më thonë rejnë të pëthënë shtu, ka janë burgje. Këta tonë, këne na thënë, s'ka në burgje, veç janë vromë në përbërë masive.
Bab I djallit të pagjetën, Reshatit. Më njëherë mas lufte, mas atit mjeri, mas asaj kalle, mas asaj këthimit në shpe, unë me familje u ktheva në shpe dhe më ngante djalli.
There is a sense that the file of missing person is not taken that seriously for the families. So there is a kind of frustration and also a lack of trust from the families towards the mechanism that is in place. The Multi-Ethnic Resource Center should play a role in allowing families of victims to share information in full confidence.
Pa shikoni, sigurisht ai që I ka dhimje. Këtë qatë pasuni që e kom, veç familjen, shatoni, qëtë kohë tholë, veç me ditë që ka e në mos bulue, që ju në orë s'ka I vërit, edhe të 3 vjetë.
Gjithmonë kemi thonë se qysh do t'jetë një zyre e cila I kish bashku shoqatat, po të kish punu edhe pavarur në prej qeverisë, prej pushtetit. Kështu që dëshira jonë ishte gjithnjë të qelet një zyre e cila tash I qenë burimore për personat pa gjetur.
Më konë sa t'jam gjallë me ditë, a janë gjallë, as janë gjallë.
Materijalno ne zanima me ništa. Mene zanima samo da ih pronađemo I da ih sahranimo.
Kryesore është çështja e të pagjetëve për në mujtë më ardhe pajtim.
the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, which was adopted on December 2010, 23rd December, General Assembly of the United Nations in its resolution 47/133. Came into force on 23rd December 2010 in accordance with the Article 39 of 1, which reads as follows. The convention shall enter into the force on the 30th day after the date of a deposit with the Secretary General of the United Nations of the 20th instrument of ratification or accession. The preamble goes like this: the states parties to the convention, considering the obligation of the states under the Charter of United Nations to promote universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms, having regard to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, recalling the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and other relevant international instruments in the fields of human rights, humanitarian law, and international criminal. Also, recalling the Declaration on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations in its resolution 47/133 of 18 December 1992. Aware of the extreme seriousness of an enforced disappearance, which constitutes a crime and in certain circumstances defined in international law a crime against humanity, determined to prevent enforced disappearances, to combat impunity for the crime of enforced disappearance, considering the right of any person not to be subjected to enforced disappearance, the right of victims to the justice and to reparation, affirming the right of any victim to know the truth about the circumstances of an enforced disappearance and the fate of disappeared person, and the right to freedom to seek, receive, and impart information to this end, have agreed on this following articles. And there are around 25 articles in part 1 and part 2, 36 articles, 26 to 36, and part 3, article 37 to 45. So due to paucity of time, we are not going to in detail of all these articles. So this International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance provides the detailed provisions and account for the cost. A case study from Mexico, the hashtag that went around the world Hashtags, those little phrases that pepper social media chatter, are often overlooked or, yes, rarely do they help save lives. Yet in February 2019, an obtrusive little hashtag helped to do just that. The municipality of Ayutthaya de los Libres is a mountainous farming community in the hills of Puebla, the southwestern Mexican state to which Acapulco belongs. The town is known for its hibiscus flower farms and for growing maize, chilies, gourds, and bananas. But it also has a reputation for recurring drug-related violence, past military excesses, and periodic abuse of the indigenous community, which calls it home. In Ayutthaya de los Libres, the translated into such horrors as forced sterilization campaigns and mass murders during the 1990s, the rape of 2 indigenous village women by soldiers in 2002, and the murder of 2 human rights defenders in 2009. From this turmoil emerged Optilia Ugonium, Manuel E. Mefa community activist. Her soft voice believes the steely determined that makes her such an effective advocate for the indigenous rights organization of the Mefa indigenous people, which she co-founded with Cotomic Ramirez, an agronomist who would become her husband. So she says, I was 15. I first became an activist. She said, people laughed because I was so young, but I had seen violence against women. A man once beat his pregnant wife and her unborn baby died. She was too scared to bring charges against him, and even though he was arrested, he was quickly released. When she heard about the 2 women's rapes by soldiers, she looked up their case with vehemence, receiving frequent death threats as a result. She had a reason to worry because crimes in Mexico are often unpunished, especially when committed by authorities or organized crime. More than 1 lakh people have disappeared without a trace in Mexico, and indigenous women are particularly vulnerable. Despite receiving ongoing threats, she decided to continue her activism. I started working to help defend these women. Well, we all deserve to live well without violence, she says. Eventually, the threats against her would become so unrelenting and brutal that the Inter-American Court of Human Rights ruled she needed official protection. By 2019, she was back in Ayutthaya and has been elected a member of the municipal government. Part of her job was to oversee public works, budget, and she soon uncovered irregularities in spending as well as the involvement of drug traffickers. Manuel spoke up. Later that year, as Manuel was leaving town in a taxi, and another human rights defender from OPIM, Lario Cornelio Castro, a car cut them off. They grabbed us both and threatened to cut off one of my fingers. They put us face down, they covered my mouth and eyes and hit me on the head. She said, I thought I would not make it out. Others before me disappeared. I worried they would go after my children next. But Manuel and Castro were released within 4 days, thanks for a hashtag and a lot of work. So Manuel release after 96 hours in captivity may have seemed miraculous, but it was the outcome of intense work behind the scenes. We found that about Optila's disappearance within half an hour, even communications were complicated, said Jesua Spina, Deputy Representative of the UN Human Rights Office in Mexico. We had to react quickly with state and federal officials. As soon as the news of the abduction surfaced, the office sought information, concluding the state and local authorities could either be involved or perhaps be able to communicate with the kidnappers. That there was a chance public pressure could work. Urgent meetings were held within the state governor and the state general prosecutor, and the federal government became involved. Increasingly, national and international pressure was brought to bear on local authorities. As part of the UN strategy, UN Human Rights issued public statements condemning the kidnapping and demanding Manuel and Castro to be released alive. Within hours of the abduction, it has produced and started disseminating a video and photographs demanding that Manuel be found alive. Although highly effective was the launch of social media campaigning whose hashtag Queremos Abtila, we want Abtilia, went viral in Mexico. The social media effort, fueled in large part by long-time partners in civil society groups, was rapid and effective, trending on Twitter and accumulating hundreds and thousands of views. Meantime, while hoping for her release, her husband, Cortmac Ramfres, prepared for the birth. I really thought I would never see her again, so I gathered the children to lull them. At the very moment, I received a call from Abtila. He said, national and international pressure had succeeded. Manuel and Castro were dropped off on a country road, a full 4 days after their abduction. This pressure is why I am alive, Manuel said, and I am grateful for what they did work. So that's how a simple hashtag saved lives. So a life in hiding, Manuel and Castro might be free, but they live in the shadows in a shelter under official government protection. This is the second time Manuel has been forced to move from her home and became an internally displaced person. The protection mechanism for human rights defenders and journalists was born in 2012 because of the widespread pressure to end the growing violence against the human rights defenders and journalists. Though this mechanism, different levels of governments provide security measures that allow individuals who seek protection to live lives with less fear and danger. The mechanism is not perfect, but it has saved lives, explains George Ruiz D. Angel, a lawyer who has worked with mechanism. There would be more assassinations without it, but it can be strengthened because in the end, it is not sustainable. For many years, NGOs have maintained that reinforcing the mechanism is not enough. There must be an end to the impunity criminals often enjoy when the merger attack human rights defenders and journalists. In 2019, UN Human Rights accompanied Manuel when she received the National Human Rights Prize from the President of Mexico, confirming her advocacy work and acknowledging the importance of protecting indigenous women. Manuel believes some good has come out of their ordeal. I feel the country is now more open and the issue of killing women is now spoken about openly. What we need is to apply the laws that protect women, she said. Despite their relative story, Manuel and Castro are anxious to return to home, to their families and their community work. They see their loved ones once or twice a year, visits that require extensive planning and logistics. Otherwise, they communicate online or by phone, which they also use for their human rights work. We asked the authorities to do a risk assessment to see whether it is safe for us to return to Guerrero. That is what we are waiting for, said Manuel. So similarly, there are many such stories against enforced disappearances and case studies. So working group on enforced or involuntary disappearances, one of the working group's primary tasks is to assist families determining the fate of whereabouts of their family members who are reportedly disappeared in the humanitarian capacity. The working group serves as a channel of communication between the family members of victims of enforced disappearance and other sources reporting cases of disappearances and the government concerned. To achieve this, the group receives, examines, transmits to governments reports of enforced disappearances submitted by relatives of disappeared persons or human rights organizations acting on their behalf, requests governments to carry out investigation and to inform working group of results, follows up these requests of information on a periodic basis, has a preventive role by assisting states in overcoming obstacles, the realization of the Declaration of the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances. This is done both while carrying out country visits and by providing advisory services when requested. The most recent resolution renewing the mandate of the working group was adopted by the Human Rights Council in October 2020. The working group is composed of 5 independent experts of balanced geographical representation. Together, they investigate individual cases and produce reports and opinions in order to fulfill the mandate. They meet 3 times a year in Geneva. Today, we are also commemorating Raksha Bandhan, this Rakhi Purnami. Actually, as today, the Purnami has come after sunrise, so it will be there tomorrow at the time of sunrise. So generally, today, now it is Purnami, and tomorrow daytime, so we have Purnami. So in some parts of the country, today evening also Rakhi is celebrated, and tomorrow morning, that is tomorrow, is considered as Purnami. So tomorrow is also celebrated as Rakhi Purnami. So it is a festival, a ritual, a celebration to honor the bond between brothers and sisters. It involves tying a sacred thread, exchanging gifts and offering sweets and other gifts. The festival is celebrated on Purnima in Shravana Masa and has various rituals such as preparing food, tying Rakhi to deities, observing fasts, and exchanging offerings. The significance of Raksha Bandhan is seen in various scriptures like Yamuna and Yama, Lord Krishna and Draupadi, Goddess Lakshmi and Lord Bali, and also the birth of Santoshi Mata and Queen Karnavati and Emperor Humayun and many more. It is an auspicious occasion for everyone across the world. It is a day to cherish the relationship between a brother and a sister. They might not be biological brothers or blood-related brother and sister. They can be anyone who share the feeling, emotion, or a bond of being a brother and a sister. They show their love to them, tying Rakhi, sacred thread, and offering food and other gifts, celebrating the bond of love and affection they share. It is most beautiful relationship on the earth which can never be explained in any words. So, as already mentioned, today and tomorrow is celebrated as Raksha Bandhan Day. Anyone who would like to celebrate can wake up early in the morning and prepare delicious food offerings, and offer to the Lord or to your brother or sister. Generally, people also observe fast on this day, those who have the practice, and decorate a plate with vermilion, akshata, sweets, and rakhi. So they put a tilak and some akshata on their brother's forehead and tie rakhi on their right wrist and offer sweets. In return, brother give them a gift. It may be in cash or kind or a material, doesn't matter, because the greatest gift is the gift of protection and security that a brother offers physically and emotionally. If he is an elder brother, then sister generally takes blessings from him. If the brother is younger, he takes blessings from his sister by touching their feet or by hugging or by similar gestures which are culturally appropriate. Sisters also give something to their brothers, as well as brothers do. Again, it depends. There is no rule that one has to give another, but it is customary based on one's socio-economical conditions. They can offer anything that they can contribute. And generally, those who are fasting, they break their fast after Rakhi celebration. And the wonderful bond that we all carry is the bond of brothers and sisters, which is a very sacred bond, and where both of them, in fact, this also empowers gender equality and gender empowerment, because both the genders are equally respected, treated, empowered, and protected, because one gender is assuring that the gender for their safety, health, and well-being. And brothers and sisters share a bond as a friends who truly understand each other, irrespective of their gender, age, and other factors. They protect each other like a parent and fight like an enemies, like Tom and Jerry, but still they always stand by their side when they are in trouble. So this amazing relationship is irreplaceable. This is the day of joy and happiness, brother-sister relationship, and the bond one can also see through our mythological stories and ancient scriptures. Once we will go through few, that we'll see one occasion where Yamuna tied Rakhi to her brother Yama. Once Lord Yama did not visit her sister goddess Yamuna for 12 years. Goddess Ganga reminded him to visit goddess Yamuna. Yamuna got really happy by seeing her brother. After so long, she has prepared delicious meal for him and celebrated this day by tying Rakhi on his breast. So Lord Yama got happy with this gesture and blessed her with immortality. So Rakhi is not new. It is there since ages and is a very ancient celebration and the sacred bond between brother and sister, especially a bond that cherishes the humanity, a bond that cherishes compassion, a bond that cherishes empathy, a bond that cherishes kindness. And there is one more occasion where Lord Krishna and Draupadi was celebrating this Rakhi. As per Hindu scriptures, once Lord Krishna was flying a kite and accidentally cut his finger. And seeing this, Draupadi immediately tore a piece of cloth from her sari and tied it around the finger. The action touched Lord Krishna and promised her to protect from all the evil activities. And he fulfilled his promise by saving her from Chirharan, when all her husbands lost in gambling, from Ayodhya and from Duryodhan and Shakti. There is one more occasion where Goddess Lakshmi celebrated Rakhi Purnam, tying the sacred thread to Lord Bali. So as per Vishnu Purana, Bali, who was an ardent devotee of Lord Vishnu, asked him for protection. Lord Vishnu accepted his request and started staying with him as doorman. After a long period, Goddess Lakshmi got emotional and went to Bali as a woman seeking shelter. He opened his doors and in return, she tied a colorful thread on his wrist for the protection. So Bali was also asked her what she wanted as a gift. Goddess Lakshmi appeared and asked him to leave her husband, and he could not say no to her, so he agreed. And there is one more occasion where the birth of Santoshi Mata, when Mansa was tying a Rakhi to her brother Ganesha. His sons Shubh and Labh also expressed a desire to celebrate this festival and asked Lord Ganesha for a sister. So Lord Ganesha fulfilled their wish by creating a daughter from fire And that is how Santoshi Mata came into existence. And one more instance where Queen Karnavati sent a Rakhi to Emperor Humayun. Once Queen Karnavati of Chittoor, Andhra Pradesh, India, was ruling her kingdom, and her kingdom was attacked by Bahadur Shah Zafar. Queen looked for the support from other kings and sent a Rakhi to Humayun to help her. But Humayun was also in the mid of the battle, so he could not reach there on time to save her. Queen and her army was defeated by Bahadur Shah Zafar, and Rani Karnavati had to perform Johar to save her dignity. But Humayun respected that Rakhi and restored her kingdom by defeating Bahadur Shah Zafar and handed over the kingdom to her eldest son, Vikramjit. So there are such many occasions where the Rakhi was celebrated and respected. So such a great occasion, every year we get a wonderful opportunity to celebrate this wonderful occasion and rejoice and cherish this wonderful bond. So let's today or tomorrow, whichever day you are celebrating, let's cherish the bond and offer our blessings, protection, safety to our siblings or to anyone who cherish the bond of brother and sister. There is also one mantra that is recited while tying Rakhi. Of course, different cultural variations exist and practices exist in different locations, though it is not same, but the ritual is same, the tying of Rakhi and seeking and offering blessings. But it is practiced in, along with few changes across and with certain variations across geographical locations and based on their cultures and traditions. A mantra is also read by those who have this practice while tying Rakhi on the wrist by reading that mantra. Even the Pandit can also tie Rakhi to Yahan for their protection. It is Yan Bando Baliraja Danvendro Mahabash. This is a famous mythological story behind this mantra. which is often read at the time of worship of Raksha Bandhan. In some cultures, once Dharmaraj Yudhishthira expressed the desire to hear such a story from Lord Sri Krishna, which can lead to liberation from all sufferings and difficulties. In reply to this, Sri Krishna told them this story. There was a war for 12 consecutive years between tales and incidents. In the mythical era, it was known that the victory of the Asuras in the war is certain. The king of demons occupied the three worlds and declared himself the king of the Trilok. Devas of the demons, Devraj, Indra Guru, then reached Brihaspati's shelter and prayed for protection. Then the Raksha Puja was performed, was completed in the morning. In this, Gruha Brihaspati read the mantra mentioned above, which was recited. In addition, Indra and his wife Indrani also repeated this mantra behind. Indra's wife Indrani gave all the Brahmins the power of protection in the defense and tied her on the breast of the right hand of Indra. Indra defeated the Asur with the powers derived from this puja rituals and regained his lost regime. There are various practices which are, differing from place to place, but the basic ritual is tying of Rakhi and offering and seeking the blessings and, sharing some sweets and savories and wishing for prosperity of this wonderful bond of brother and sister, whether they are by the feelings, emotions, or by the biological, that is blood relation. It doesn't matter. So with this, we shall conclude today's sessions here, and we'll continue tomorrow. So we request everyone to quickly fill the feedback form. Which is raised in the form of polls, has been raised. You can see overall feedback form in the form of polls. We request everyone to quickly fill up the feedback form. Those who have not registered, we request everyone to quickly register. Registration is only once for the entire week. Which has been shared in the chat box after filling up the feedback form. You can fill the registration form if not yet completed. So that is Google form, it will be there. This form will be closed automatically when the meeting is ended. So we request everyone to quickly attend to the overall feedback form, and we thank each and everyone for joining us today. Happy Raksha Bandhan, Rakhi Purnami to all of you and your family members. So see you all tomorrow. Take care. Good night.